The television courtroom had never witnessed such pure, unfiltered arrogance meeting its perfect match in a single devastating word. Karen Sullivan, a 52-year-old real estate agent who drove a white Mercedes with vanity plates and wore designer blazers like armor, sat in Judge Judy's courtroom with the kind of smug confidence that could only come from 15 years of bulldozing clients without consequence. Across from her sat Marcus Thompson, a 68-year-old retired teacher whose weathered hands trembled slightly as he clutched a folder containing evidence that would soon destroy Karen's entire career. What happened in the next 12 minutes would become the most viral courtroom moment in internet history, shared over 89 million times across every social media platform imaginable, with the hashtag #Don'tInterruptJudy trending for 8 consecutive days. But here's what makes this story absolutely insane. Karen didn't just lose her case. She didn't just get embarrassed on national television. What Judge Judy did to her with a single word was so devastatingly brutal, so perfectly timed, that it ended Karen's real estate career, triggered criminal investigations, and made her the most hated woman in America overnight. Before we show you the exact moment when Karen interrupted Judge Judy for the 6th time and got silenced by one word that lasted 38 seconds of pure stunned silence, make sure you hit that like button if you support holding predatory businesspeople accountable for exploiting vulnerable seniors. Subscribe so you never miss these explosive courtroom moments where entitled bullies finally meet someone who won't tolerate their behavior. Trust me, what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and prove that disrespecting Judge Judy is the single worst decision anyone can make in a courtroom. Now, let me take you inside the courtroom and show you exactly how this whole situation exploded. Marcus Thompson had never wanted to be in a courtroom. After 40 years of teaching high school English, inspiring thousands of students to love literature and think critically, he had earned a modest pension of $1,800 per month and a quiet retirement with his beloved wife, Patricia. When Patricia passed away from cancer 8 months ago, Marcus felt like half of his soul had been ripped away. The medical bills had devastated their savings, leaving him with almost nothing except the small rental property they had owned for 30 years. Selling it was supposed to be simple closure, the final chapter in their life together, a way to honor Patricia's memory by handling their affairs with the same integrity and honesty that had defined their 45-year marriage. That's when Karen Sullivan entered his life like a tornado wrapped in Chanel perfume. She had promised premium service for a premium listing, flashed her credentials as a top-producing agent with a wall full of awards, and convinced Marcus that his property would sell quickly under her expert guidance. Marcus, who had been trained as an educator to trust people at their word and honor agreements with absolute commitment, signed the paperwork without the aggressive lawyer review that Karen discouraged as unnecessary and expensive. The property sold within 3 weeks for $340,000, and Marcus should have walked away with enough money to cover Patricia's remaining medical bills and secure a comfortable final chapter of his life. Instead, Karen presented him with a bill for $6,500 in what she called mandatory processing fees, documentation charges, and premium marketing costs that were never disclosed in their original agreement. What Marcus didn't know was that he had just become Karen's latest victim in a pattern of predatory behavior specifically targeting elderly clients who didn't know how to fight back against aggressive real estate tactics and legal intimidation. Karen Sullivan had perfected the art of exploitation over 15 years in the business. At 52 years old, she had built a reputation in her firm as someone who always maximized commissions, always found extra fees to charge, and never let a client walk away with more money than absolutely necessary. She kept detailed notes on her targets, identifying elderly homeowners dealing with grief, confusion, or financial stress as what she privately called easy marks. Her strategy was simple and devastatingly effective. Bury complex fee structures in dense contract language, present additional charges after the sale was complete, and intimidate anyone who questioned her with aggressive letters from her attorney full of legal language designed to terrify people living on fixed incomes. When Marcus politely questioned the $6,500 in unexpected fees, Karen's friendly facade disappeared completely and revealed the predator underneath. She sent him a letter drafted by her attorney, threatening litigation, warning about damage to his credit score, and making it clear that fighting her would cost far more than just paying what she demanded. For Marcus, this wasn't just a financial catastrophe that would wipe out the last remnants of his and Patricia's life savings. It was a fundamental betrayal of the trust and integrity that had defined his entire career as an educator. He had spent 4 decades teaching young people to stand up for what's right, to document everything, and to never let bullies win through intimidation. Now, sitting in Judge Judy's courtroom with his meticulously organized folder of evidence, Marcus was about to prove that those lessons still mattered, even when facing someone like Karen Sullivan. The Judge Judy courtroom buzzed with its usual electric energy as cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats, expecting another routine small claims dispute to unfold before their eyes. Production assistants made their final checks while the bailiff took his position, and Judge Judy reviewed her notes one last time with that knowing expression regular viewers had learned to recognize as the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. Karen Sullivan sat in the defendant's chair with crossed arms and a smirk playing at the corners of her perfectly lipsticked mouth, occasionally glancing at her designer watch as if this entire proceeding was an inconvenient interruption to her busy schedule. She had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, convinced that her experience bulldozing clients and intimidating complainers would translate perfectly to handling a television judge. What Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy had already spotted 12 separate lies and inconsistencies in her initial paperwork, and she was preparing to make an example out of this predatory real estate agent that would echo through television history forever. Judge Judy opened the proceedings with her signature no-nonsense approach, her voice cutting through the courtroom air like a surgical scalpel. "Mr. Thompson, you're suing Ms. Sullivan for $6,500 in undisclosed fees that were charged after your property sale was completed. Tell me what happened." It was a simple question, the kind Judge Judy had asked thousands of times before in her decades on the bench. Marcus cleared his throat nervously and began in his soft, measured voice that still carried the cadence of a lifelong educator. "Your Honor, I was told the commission would be 6% of the sale price, which I agreed to. But after the sale closed, Ms. Sullivan presented me with additional fees that were never." That's when Karen made her first catastrophic mistake. She let out an exaggerated sigh loud enough for the microphones to catch and interrupted with a condescending tone that dripped with fake sophistication. "Oh please, he's confused. Old people always forget the details of what they signed. I went over everything with him multiple times." The courtroom went momentarily silent. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into that expression that experienced viewers knew meant someone had just crossed a line they could never uncross. "Miss Sullivan," Judge Judy said, her tone still professional but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass, "I didn't ask for your commentary on Mr. Thompson's memory. I asked him to explain what happened. Continue, Mr. Thompson." But instead of backing down or recognizing the warning, Karen rolled her eyes dramatically and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "Whatever, this is going to take forever if he tells it." The audience members exchanged glances, a few audible gasps rippling through the gallery. The tension level in the room had just jumped from 0 to dangerous in less than 60 seconds. Marcus, visibly shaken by Karen's disrespect, tried to continue his testimony. Judge Judy listened patiently as he explained the timeline of the sale, the original contract terms, and the shocking demand for additional fees that came after he thought everything was completed. When he finished, Judge Judy turned her attention to Karen with a look that should have terrified anyone with basic survival instincts. "Miss Sullivan, I'm looking at the contract Mr. Thompson signed. Can you show me where these processing fees and documentation charges are disclosed?" Karen reached for her briefcase with exaggerated confidence, pulling out printed pages that she had clearly prepared to use as weapons in this battle. She began launching into a lengthy explanation about industry standards and customary practices, but Judge Judy held up her hand. "That's not what I asked. I asked where in this specific contract these fees are disclosed." Karen committed interruption number 2, and this one was even more audacious than the first. "If you'd let me finish, Judge, you'd understand how real estate actually works in the modern market." The implication hung in the air like poisonous gas. Karen had just suggested that Judge Judy, a woman who had presided over thousands of contract disputes in her career, didn't understand basic business practices. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair slowly, steepling her fingers in a gesture that regular viewers knew meant someone was about to get absolutely destroyed. "Is that so?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Please, Miss Sullivan, educate me about how real estate works." Karen, incredibly, completely missed the sarcasm and the danger she was in. She actually began trying to lecture Judge Judy, pulling out printed articles from random internet websites and explaining industry practices like she was teaching a child. "You see, Judge, in premium real estate transactions, there are always additional costs that sophisticated clients understand are part of the process. Mr. Thompson here just isn't familiar with how these high-level deals work." The audience began murmuring, heads shaking in disbelief that anyone could be this stupid. Marcus sat quietly, his hands gripping his folder tighter, watching this woman dig her own grave with every word. Judge Judy let Karen talk for exactly 45 seconds before interrupting her mid-sentence. Miss Sullivan, I've reviewed the documentation. These fees you're describing aren't in the contract. So let me ask you again, and this time answer the actual question. Where are they disclosed? Karen made her third devastating interruption, and this time she added a physical gesture that would be replayed millions of times across social media. She literally waved her hand in a dismissive gesture toward Judge Judy, the kind of motion you'd make to brush away an annoying insect. That's just standard boilerplate contract language. You're reading too much into the fine print. These things are implied in premium service agreements. The wife, the dismissal, the casual disrespect. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Judge Judy stood up from her chair, something she almost never did, and her voice dropped to a deadly calm that was somehow more terrifying than if she had shouted. Did you just wave me off? Karen's confidence faltered for just a second, but her arrogance was too deeply ingrained to let her recognize the cliff she was about to drive off. I'm just trying to move this along, Your Honor. We're wasting time on minor contractual details that don't really matter in the bigger picture. Judge Judy sat back down slowly, like a predator settling into position before a strike. Minor details. I see. Mr. Thompson, please show me what you brought. Marcus opened his folder with trembling hands and began pulling out documents. Emails. Text messages. Printed phone records. A small digital recorder. Judge Judy took each item, reviewing them methodically while Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier confidence starting to crack around the edges. Miss Sullivan, I'm looking at 7 emails here where Mr. Thompson specifically asked about additional fees before signing, and in every single one, you assured him that the 6% commission covered all costs. Would you like to explain that? Karen made interruption number 4, and this time her voice rose with aggressive defensiveness as she literally stood up slightly from her chair and pointed her finger toward Judge Judy. Because he didn't read the contract thoroughly. That's not my problem if he didn't do his due diligence. I can't be responsible for every client who doesn't. Judge Judy's gavel came down like a gunshot. Sit down. Now. The command echoed through the courtroom with such force that Karen actually stumbled backward into her seat. But even then, even with the clearest possible warning, she kept talking. Your Honor, I'm just trying to defend myself against these accusations. Judge Judy's voice cut through like a laser. I didn't give you permission to speak. The audience was dead silent. Marcus looked like he was watching a horror movie unfold. Karen's face had gone from confident to flushed to slightly pale as some animal part of her brain finally started recognizing that she was in serious danger. Judge Judy opened another folder, this one thicker than the first. Miss Sullivan, I have something interesting here. It seems Mr. Thompson isn't your first client to complain about mysterious fees appearing after closing. In fact, this is the 7th formal complaint filed against you with the State Real Estate Board in the past 5 years. She began reading names and case numbers, each one describing a nearly identical pattern of undisclosed fees targeting elderly clients. Karen's face went from pale to ashen as she realized that Judge Judy had done extensive research into her background. Your Honor, people complain when they don't get their way in business. That's just... And then Karen made the mistake that would seal her fate forever. She laughed. Actually laughed out loud at Judge Judy's evidence. Oh come on, this is ridiculous. These are just unhappy clients who regret their decisions. That's just business in the real estate world. The courtroom went so silent you could hear the air conditioning hum. Judge Judy's face transformed into an expression of pure, controlled fury that made her look like an avenging angel preparing to deliver judgment. You think this is funny? Her voice was quiet, deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded volcanic eruptions. Karen's laughter died in her throat as she finally recognized that she had made a catastrophic error. But it was too late. Judge Judy began pulling out more documents. Mr. Thompson came prepared today, Miss Sullivan. Unlike you, he brought evidence. Real evidence. Not internet printouts and arrogant assumptions. She held up the small digital recorder that Marcus had placed on her bench. This is a recording of a conversation you had with Mr. Thompson, made legally in this state which has one-party consent laws. Would you like to hear it? Karen's mouth opened. Her face was a mixture of panic and residual arrogance, that toxic combination of someone who still thought they might talk their way out of disaster. She was about to interrupt Judge Judy for the 6th time. The entire courtroom held its breath, every eye fixed on this moment, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. Karen began to form words. Your Honor, I don't. The single word exploded from Judge Judy's mouth with the force of a tsunami crashing into a shoreline, and the effect on Karen Sullivan was instantaneous and absolute. Her mouth froze mid-sentence, her jaw hanging open as if her entire nervous system had short-circuited. The word wasn't shouted. It wasn't screamed. It was delivered with such concentrated authority, such distilled power, that it seemed to physically stop Karen's ability to form language. The courtroom fell into a silence so complete that the sound of someone's phone vibrating 3 rows back sounded like a jackhammer. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Karen's eyes were wide, her perfectly manicured hands trembling on the defendant's table. 15 seconds. 20. The cameras captured every microscopic detail of her face, transforming from aggressive confidence to complete confusion to dawning horror. 25 seconds. 30. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no sound emerged. 35 seconds. The audience didn't move, didn't breathe, watching this complete psychological breakdown happening in real time. 38 seconds of pure, uninterrupted silence before Karen finally managed to whisper, "I'm sorry." Judge Judy leaned forward with the intensity of a laser cutting through steel. "Miss Sullivan, you have interrupted me 5 times in the last 8 minutes. 5 times. You've mocked this court, dismissed the plaintiff, waved me off like I'm some minimum wage employee at a store where you're trying to return something without a receipt, and then you laughed, actually laughed, at evidence of your pattern of exploiting vulnerable people." Her voice was measured, controlled, but carrying enough fury to melt titanium. "But here's what you don't know, what you couldn't possibly know because you were too busy being arrogant and disrespectful to do even basic research about who you were dealing with." She opened the thick folder that had been sitting on her bench since the beginning of the case. "I don't just hear cases, Miss Sullivan. I investigate them." The revelation began like pulling a thread that would unravel Karen's entire existence. Judge Judy revealed that Karen had 3 previous ethics violations with the state real estate board, each one carefully documented and more damaging than the last. 5 years ago, Karen had charged an elderly couple $7,800 in undisclosed fees after their home sale, threatening them with legal action when they complained. The case was settled quietly when Karen agreed to return half the money, and the couple, intimidated and exhausted, dropped their formal complaint. 3 years ago, a widower discovered that Karen had forged his signature on a contract addendum that added mysterious administrative fees to his transaction. That violation resulted in a 90-day license suspension that Karen had carefully hidden from subsequent clients by claiming she was on an extended vacation. 18 months ago, a retired veteran tried to file a complaint about Karen's practices, and she responded by having her attorney send threatening letters, ultimately resulting in a restraining order being issued against her for harassment and intimidation. "You're not a real estate agent, Miss Sullivan," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying across the courtroom like thunder. "You're a predator with a license, and you specifically target the most vulnerable people in our society. The elderly, the grieving, the confused. People like Mr. Thompson who just buried his wife and trusted you to act with basic human decency." She held up a printed email, and Karen's face went from pale to absolutely white. "This is an email you sent to your assistant coordinator 3 months ago. Would you like me to read it to the court?" Karen shook her head frantically, tears beginning to form in her eyes, but Judge Judy read it anyway. "These old people never fight back. Charge whatever you want in fees. By the time they figure out what happened, it's too late to do anything about it." The courtroom erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Marcus Thompson put his face in his hands and began to cry, not from sadness but from vindication, from finally being heard and believed after months of being dismissed and intimidated. Judge Judy's verdict came down like the hammer of justice that America had been waiting to see. "Miss Sullivan, you came into my courtroom with arrogance, disrespect, and a complete lack of remorse for the pain you've caused to vulnerable people who trusted you." Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority as she delivered the ruling that would change both lives forever. "You are ordered to return the full $6,500 in fraudulent fees to Mr. Thompson immediately. Additionally, you will pay $4,000 in punitive damages for the emotional distress you caused this man while he was grieving his wife. You will also pay $2,500 in court costs. Total judgment, $13,000. Karen collapsed forward, her head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the reality of her destruction sank in. But Judge Judy wasn't finished, and what came next would end Karen's career permanently. "Furthermore, I am forwarding this case to the State Real Estate Board with my personal recommendation that your license be permanently revoked. I'm also sending all evidence to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential fraud charges." The woman who had walked into the courtroom with a smirk and designer clothes was now a broken, weeping mess on national television, her carefully constructed facade shattered by one word and the truth she couldn't escape. Judge Judy turned to Marcus with a softer expression. "Mr. Thompson, you did everything right. You documented everything, you stayed calm, you trusted the system even when it seemed hopeless. Your wife Patricia would be incredibly proud of how you stood up for yourself today." Marcus broke down completely, 40 years of teaching integrity and honesty validated in this single moment. The audience rose in a spontaneous standing ovation that lasted 15 full seconds before Judge Judy gavelled for order. Within hours, the clip exploded across every social media platform. The moment Judge Judy said "don't" became an instant meme, shared 89 million times with hashtags like "Don't Interrupt Judy" and one-word shutdown trending worldwide. Karen Sullivan's real estate license was permanently revoked within 2 weeks. 17 additional victims came forward with similar stories, leading to criminal fraud charges that would eventually result in a 3-year prison sentence. Her name became synonymous with predatory business practices in real estate ethics courses nationwide. Meanwhile, Marcus used his $13,000 settlement to pay off Patricia's remaining medical bills and established a small fund to help other seniors fight back against exploitation. Karen Sullivan interrupted Judge Judy 5 times, but her 6th interruption never came. Because Judge Judy only needed one word to end her entire career: "Don't."